And we start with the 2 sessions from the British Council. As said, the order is changed. S13 first, Transnational Education. So without further ado, I would say those in the session, if you could please switch on your microphone and also your particularly your camera, and then I leave it to you, Kevin, as the chair of the session, and withdraw myself and also stop the sharing.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. My name is Kevin Van Corter. I'm a Senior Higher Education Advisor at the British Council. And this first part of this hour-long session, so the first half an hour, is looking at the topic of transnational education and the impact of transnational education at a very local level. I'd like to start by just introducing the wider British Council commissioned research in this area very briefly, because we only have half an hour for this session. And then we have Janet Ilieva, who's going to be, who did the research for us from Education Insight, who will be describing the research. And then we have 2 case studies, which I'll introduce after Janet has spoken. So just to start off with a little bit of background, we're talking here about trying to understand the local impact of transnational education. Now, just for anyone who doesn't really, isn't really familiar with the term transnational education, this is where the delivery of higher education is offered outside of the country where the provider is based. So through various models such as branch campuses, joint and dual programs, and other forms of collaborative delivery. I think just to very quickly set the scene, there has been a really large growth in T&E programs in recent years. And increasingly, this type of education provision is contributing to host countries' national priorities. Various models have been developed, and there is very much a trend towards partnership-led models. And a very much a feeling that these types of partnerships need to benefit the host country, and in particular the local environment where they're delivered. So the British Council has for many years been examining the research and researching the impact of transnational education. But I think the area of local impact has been very under-researched in general. There's very little research out there about this very, very local impact of transnational education programs. So what impact they bring to local societies, economies, and communities. I think universities do take their local responsibilities very seriously, but I think we need to understand to what extent this is also the case when transnational education is being delivered. So we asked Janet Ilieva through Education Insight to look at this impact, this local impact in a range of European countries. And I'm going to then stop now because as I said, we've only got half an hour, and I'm going to hand over to Janet, who's going to go through the top line findings of the research. So over to you, Janet.
Thank you, Kevin, and good morning, everybody. I shall go straight into the research findings of this presentation. I've listed the research team that contributed to this research. I worked alongside Pat Killingly, an old colleague of mine, Vangelis Siligiris from the T&E Hub, and Uwe Brandenburg, who introduced the session. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. What the research aim was to quantify the contribution of transnational education to the local area. And I have to flag up front that the research was exploratory, and as such, the idea was to identify some of the key areas that we think T&E contributes to the local area that can be then further explored in a much more robust and quantifiable way. As such, the first contribution was a contribution to the development of local skills agenda. T&E is perceived that it addresses local labour market needs, and there is also a perception that English taught programs, they actually bring talent to the area, and this talent meets the needs of international businesses. We did a survey with transnational education students, and we found a huge language capital present among that student population. As you can see on the chart, 79% of the surveyed students speak at least 2 foreign languages, that is in addition to their mother tongue. And both employers, but also local education providers felt that by attracting international students or students that bring a language capital, they feel quite a significant market niche. And it also, there is a huge potential to bring international businesses to that particular area. There is also a feeling that transnational education programs contribute to the knowledge development, but also the knowledge circulation in the area. And as such, it counteracts brain drain from that particular area. A significant contribution is local employment. And this is really through attracting both academic staff to teach those programs, but also non-academic staff to the particular area. By bringing students to the locality, they also bring services that need to support student demand in that particular area. As such, the contribution is not just in terms of education, but also in terms of consumption of local goods and services. And if we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. The other significant area was contribution to local higher education provision. Students' perceptions about their employability aspects was that transnational education programs enhances their employability. It makes them more recruitable locally, and that view was held by 89% of the surveyed students. But equally, the local higher education providers felt that co-branding with a reputable UK partner in that instance contributes to their marketing and local positioning, both with other higher education institutions, but also with students and local employers. Previous research has established that one of the main areas that UK partner institutions contribute is stringent quality assurance practices, and that research confirmed that finding. Equally, transnational education was found to contribute to the internationalization of local higher education delivery. I have to caveat this finding, this is exploratory study, but we found that this is quite a significant one, and perhaps needs to be, the finding of this needs to be verified in a more robust quantitative manner. Having said that, what we mean is that these programs bring international students to the area. We found that more than a third of the surveyed students undertaking TNE programs were actually international students. That's 35% of the students' population on TNE programs. But also, given that the delivery is usually in the means of English language, there is a contribution to English taught programs that are delivered in the selected European countries. But also another significant aspect was internationalization of the curricula. So these are all aspects that bring a stronger international dimension to the local delivery of higher education. And in addition to that, there is also a wider reach of local partners, international networks. It's not just the UK partner they work with, but the entire network that an international institution can bring to the locality that is perceived to be adding an advantage. And if we can move to the next slide. Thank you. Contribution to local access to higher education, I believe, is one of the very underexplored areas of terms of impact of transnational education. Our case study was based on Greece. Greece is one of the countries in the European Union with the highest participation rate in higher education. Traditionally, we found that TNE contributes to countries, less developed countries, where access to HE can be an issue. But it is fair to say that talking about quality of access, not just generally access to higher education, but quality of higher education is underexplored dimension of transnational education programs. This is particularly true in areas where courses are either insufficient or there are limited places to those courses, but that's on the supply side. But equally, if we look on the demand side, it is possible that countries with more stringent higher education systems cater to students that may be atypical university goers, such as mature students or students that have family or work commitments. And as such, it is fair to claim that transnational education directly contributes to meeting the United Nations Strategic Development Goal 4, which very much focuses on access and quality of education. Our review of transnational education programs delivered by UK universities established that 62% of those programs are delivered in ODA countries. But also the primary evidence collected so far suggests that transnational education acts as a mechanism that supports a global widening participation agenda by improving access to underrepresented university groups and disadvantaged student groups. Next slide, please. And we finished the study focusing on two misconceptions about transnational education. There is a wide-held belief that TNE hijacks direct student recruitment. And we found that this is really not the case. One of the analytical findings of the research studies student flows and expansion of transnational education provision. We found that the two of them grew significantly over the same period of time. A series of research studies have also proven that actually transnational education can be an extension of direct recruitment, and many universities use TNE to support their direct recruitment to the UK, and this usually happens when a student commences a program in their home country, and then halfway through the program, they may articulate and finish the program in the UK institution. And as such, they only spend half of the time or a fraction of the time which is required to complete a program, typically in the UK, but they actually study for that degree in their home country, which is a significant saving in terms of tuition fees, but also living expenses. This aspect of transnational education is expected to grow, especially in the context of a post-Brexit engagement of higher education institutions. The second widely held misconception is about the quality of TNE programs, and they are perceived to be of an inferior quality. And again, the preliminary research carried out so far challenges this perception. It's certainly not true, and local partners actually point to the rigorous quality assurance requirements that are associated with UK transnational education programs. And I think that concludes my part of the presentation, and I shall hand over to Tim.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you very much. I know it was very difficult to summarise in such a short time, but I think you did a great job there. And we'll have time for, hopefully have some time for a few questions at the end of this part of the session. Just like to introduce our two panelists. We've got two fantastic case studies for you of UK universities who have branches or campuses in EU countries. We have Tim Gore, who's CEO of University of London Institute in Paris. But we'll start with Elizabeth Grindle-Denby, who is the campus director at the University of Lancaster in Leipzig. So over to you, Elizabeth, first, and then Tim, if you'd like to come in after Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet, and thank you very much, Kevin. Hello, my name is Elizabeth Grindle-Denby, and we can go straight to the next slide, please. The Lancaster University Leipzig is the first branch campus of a British university in Germany. It's a partnership between the top 10 ranked UK university, Lancaster University, and Navitas. And for that, it's actually been shortlisted for the PI Awards 2020. You can see nicely that you know, the green and the red together is a nice way of spanning the word. So maybe if we move to the next slide. So because the topic is very much the local impact, concentrating more on the journey to Leipzig or the journey to Germany, it has been done with a lot of support by local players, such as the Saxon State Ministry for Science, the Arts and Tourism, the German Trade and Invest Region Leipzig, the City Council, the British Embassy, and of course the British Council. So I have, please next slide, asked a few of them what actually is the benefits to the city or the region of supporting the setup of such an entity. And some of the points that were mentioned, it's of course the employability that Janet also mentioned, but also strengthening its own reputation as an academic hub. So having a good mix between different types of universities or HEIs to and strengthen their own reputation. It's of course part of an internationalization strategy for the region and for the city, but it also helps to market the region and the city further to external stakeholders and increases further the reputation. So Leipzig is probably well known in Europe, but of course with attracting especially international students, in our case currently, the hope is that there is a growing number of international ambassadors going back or communicating into the rest of the world, and thus becoming ambassadors not only for the institution, but also the city and the region. And we have fee-paying students. So one of the topic was also that there is an understanding or an assumption that these might be students with a higher economic background, and thus having spending capital back into the region. And maybe if I leave you a little bit of time to read the quote from the German Association of SMEs, who are also supporting us in the day-to-day operations. So if you want to go to the next slide. So what do we actually do? Well, we launched as a startup kind of initiative in 2020. Of course, we are not a startup as such. We are actually supported by two wonderful organizations in the UK and globally. And we started with a foundation year in January 2020. And since October this year, we are also running our bachelor programs in the areas that in the consultation process, the region and the city thought are the most useful ones to start with, especially when we go to business management, but also computer science and software engineering. Leipzig being a city which is in itself very interested in growth in these regions. So that was a nice way of bringing together decisions of setting up with the local players. And if you go to the next stage, please. Yeah, so where do we want to go from here? We see ourselves in a four-pillar understanding: teaching and learning, research, student experience, and engagement. So very much kind of working on an increase of our portfolio, including undergraduate, postgraduate, taught, and research. Also, we have research active staff. So we are a branch campus with local staff. We are looking at student experience very much from an Anglo-American way of looking at student experience. And so we are catering in a very holistic approach to our students. And of course, we have an engagement strategy, which includes involvement with other higher education providers, local industries globally and in Leipzig. And of course, the whole idea is to bring a little bit of Britishness into Leipzig, as you can see with the telephone box. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. That was a really interesting study. So we'll move from one of the sort of youngest UK TNA operations in Europe to one of the oldest. And Tim from University of London in Paris, please anyone who wants to put a question to us, please put it in the chat, and we'll have a few minutes towards 11:30 to answer those. So over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Kevin, and thank you to UE and IHES for including us, and to Janet for pushing forward this really interesting and useful study, which really highlights to me the importance of transnational education, both in terms of its impact, its local impact, but also in terms of the sort of special students that it encourages in its practice. So the University of London Institute in Paris traces its roots, as Kevin suggested, back to the end of the 19th century. We've been a part of the Franco-British academic friendship since then. There have been various phases to the development of the Institute through its years in Paris. And these have really reflected the local needs and the needs of the Franco-British relationship of the time. So it started off as a philanthropic institution that was really an academic friendly society for French and students and academics who are interested in the Anglophone world, but also Anglophone British students and academics who are interested in the Francophone world. And it was a place of meeting, a place of intellectual exchange. In the 20s, we became a French-British consortium supported by the Université de Paris on the French side and supported by a consortium of British universities on the UK side, and including the University of London. And in 1970, with the dissolution of the Université de Paris, we became fully a part of the University of London. So we're quite a unique academic environment in Paris. We're located in the 13th arrondissement of Paris, which is a very central part of Paris, right next to the Assemblée Nationale. And we are a full university. We're very, very small, but we have all of the attributes that you would expect of a university. We have undergraduate, postgraduate and research activity, and we have a public engagement and research seminar program going on. But we also see ourselves as a bridge very much between the twin cities of Paris and London. And many of our activities are concerned with looking at a transnational perspective. We run undergraduate programs in French studies, which are taught largely in French, and in international politics and cultural studies, and postgraduate programs in urban history and culture. And our partner, Queen Mary University of London, run postgraduate law and postgraduate international relations in Paris. We have a very international audience in terms of students, but all of our students, as pointed out in the British Council study, are very special students. I think they're very enterprising. They tend to be multilingual. They're interested in multiculturalism, and working in Paris gives them the opportunity to really look from a transnational perspective at the problems and the social issues that the world is facing at the moment. And over and above that, I think part of the impact that we have as an institute in Paris is not only this bridge between London and Paris, bringing British academics and students to France and vice versa, but also being a sort of academic and intellectual safe space for the discussion of issues that affect both our countries, but they affect them in very different ways. So some of the issues that we deal with are, for example, forced migration. Also, we deal a lot of social issues such as racism and how we can deal with that, diversity, integration, and so on. And clearly, the French Republican approach to these issues is very different from the British approach to these issues. And I think all of us gain from the different perspectives that can be brought to bear on these issues going forward. And again, I'd like to pay tribute to all of our students who have continued to work with us throughout the pandemic, working for almost all of them are foreign students in a foreign city, and continue to study with us through this time, and will do so through Brexit. So many of our British students, for example, go home at Christmas as Europeans and come back to what will be then a foreign city, and we hope to be part of the renewed relationship with Europe as a result of that. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you, Tim. That was really interesting. And we have about 5 minutes left. Now, I don't see any questions. I don't know if I'm looking in the right place.
There are 2 questions, Kevin.
Thank you.
If I can come in there, both for Elizabeth, actually. The first one says Lancaster Leipzig, a very interesting initiative. But how does Lancaster Leipzig deal with the fact that there are various other German and public universities, like the University of Leipzig, that are free of charge? In what regard does this offer differ from already existing educational offers in IT on site? That's the first one, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so we don't see ourselves in any form of competition with the public universities in Germany. It's more an enhancement to the city and to the demands that are different in a kind of international market. Of course, we are, as a fee-paying institution, supported as fee-paying institution, we are dealing with an agent network recruitment cycle in the global market, and in that way we have the hope that we are attracting students that would never have thought about Leipzig potentially, but actually bringing more people in for then collaborative work between the different institutions.
Can I also contribute to that?
Yes, please.
Response, Albert, thank you. I think it is fair to bear in mind that 84% of the internationally mobile students in Europe choose to study in another European country. And whereas most of continental Europe delivers tuition-free education, the UK trains many European students. And what the University of Lancaster is offering is an opportunity for these students to continue to benefit from UK degrees and to engage with UK education, and trying to cushion all the impacts and challenges that Brexit brings. And we know a bit too well what these challenges are. And for me, perhaps the biggest one would be the visa side of students having to basically apply for visas, because most of the European students, they don't have a living memory of visas and what it means. And what Lancaster is offering is this continued engagement locally, that there is still access, undisrupted access to a UK degree and delivered in a visa-free way. And this is in addition to the aspects that maybe tuition fees, the changes in the UK may impact future demand for UK education.
Yeah, there's another question for Elizabeth. We've only got a couple of minutes, so it's quite a complicated one, I think. The question is, what constraints did you find? Oh, it's gone. Oh yes, yeah. What constraints did you find in setting up a new campus in Leipzig? What local actors were involved, and how long did it take to make it a reality? You can answer that in less than a minute. Thank you.
I actually think that majorly it went quite smoothly, because we didn't set up from scratch. We could rely on the support networks that we received from Navitas as well as Lancaster University in the UK. So in that regards, we have been quite smooth in the actual setup. How long did it take? Well, the first time it was announced in the media was February 2019. And we had the first students coming in January 2020. So in that regards, I think it was quite a sporty setup, and we are still in the growth mode. So I think everything takes time, but from a first announcement of the partnership to students in this.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I don't see any more questions. Alma, can you see any others on there?
No, I think we've answered those that have come in.
And you are also perfectly in time. Thank you very, very much.